Hey guys, Rob Skiba here. So it's been a while since I've done any research type of video here on YouTube because I've been so busy working on Seed, which is coming along great, by the way. I'm really making some good progress in that regard, but I'm still always looking into things, and this whole flat Earth research is always very much on my mind, and things just keep coming across my path that catch my attention. And so I post about it every now and then on Facebook. And so if you're interested in that, you can check it out there. But I haven't been making too many videos because, like I said, I've been too busy. But I just want to do a quick one here just to talk about a few things that recently caught my attention. I posted this one today. I said, man, it just gets more and more interesting the more you dig into this research. Okay, in the late 40s and into the late 50s, there was an obsession with getting to Antarctica to explore. Something was discovered at the end of Operation Deep Freeze, which sent everyone home to draft up the Antarctic Treaty. At the same time that was happening, NASA and DARPA are created. The next thing that happens is the United States and Russia engage in a missile race and start launching high altitude nuclear bombs into the sky. We called our effort Operation Fishbowl, which was part of Project Dominic. Dominic means of the Lord. The name Dominic means of the Lord. So here they are launching nukes into the fishbowl of the Lord. Shortly after that, the United States and Russia launched into the space race. And even before Kennedy's, hey, we choose to go to the moon, even before his let's go to the moon speech, they had already sent probes to Venus, Mercury, and Mars. Yeah, even before we've allegedly been to the moon, we were sending stuff out to this is like right after Sputnik was supposedly like this massive achievement. The Russians threw a beach ball up there, with an antenna on it. Ooh, wow, amazing. That was a huge accomplishment. But like very shortly after that, and long before we started doing anything to try to get to the moon, our closest so-called neighbor in the alleged solar system, we're already sending out probes to Mercury, Venus, and Mars. Okay. But as if all of that wasn't enough, the United States and Russia both also set out to see who could drill the deepest hole into the Earth. Yep, this is all happening in the same time period as Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo. Again, if they're trying to avoid all appearances of conspiracy, they aren't helping with the names and the activities they were engaging in at the same time. People say the Russians would surely expose the United States for this, that, and the other thing if it was really a conspiracy. I hear that one all the time. If we really didn't go to the moon, don't you think, we're arch enemies with the Russians back then? They would have surely exposed us. No, not if they were engaged in the same plan, which all appearances indicate that they were. It's not a coincidence that we both countries just so happen to be engaging in the exact same activities at the exact same time after coming back from Antarctica. And I would say it's the same with every other country who signed the Antarctic Treaty. So, the Chinese aren't going to expose us. They're going to be on the same plan as everybody else that signed the Antarctic Treaty. So let's just do a quick recap here. 1, everyone becomes obsessed with Antarctica in the late 40s and late 50s. 2, everyone leaves Antarctica to draft up a treaty which would prohibit anyone from going there except under the express strict guidelines of the treaty. 3, the United States creates NASA and DARPA, that organization which creates black budget projects for the military and other agencies and other groups. 4, the United States and Russia start blowing up the sky. 5, the United States and Russia become obsessed with what's above us in space. 6, the United States and Russia become obsessed with what's beneath us. 7, the race begins to get the picture that will brainwash the world into never questioning any of this. And oh, by the way, okay, we're in a race, right? And we supposedly beat Russia in the space race, whatever that means. We did something more than or faster or whatever. Who cares? They just gave up? Really? They just gave up? I quit. I'm going home. No, they didn't give up. They sent dozens of missions to Antarctica while we were doing the Apollo program. Let that sink in. Okay. I got to say, it sure looks to me like they found something in Antarctica which challenged everything we thought we knew, and thus they immediately set out to find how high our enclosed world dome is and how deep the foundation goes. That's exactly what somebody would do if they discovered they were in a cage. They try to figure out how, wait a minute, what are the boundaries? How do I get out of here? That's exactly all of the activities that the United States and Russia in particular engaged in immediately after Operation Deep Freeze all points to exactly that. I don't know how you could come to any other conclusion. They started acting exactly like people stuck in a cage. They started immediately trying to figure out the boundaries. That's exactly what they would do. So this video is prompted by a video. I happen to be looking for footage online for a whirlpool for something I'm working on for the Seed trailer. And in the suggested videos there on the right column, on YouTube, it suggested this video right here. The deepest hole known to man goes so far down, nobody even knows what's at the bottom. So I watched that video, and that's by somebody called Did You Know?
In school, we're taught that beneath the Earth's crust lies a mantle and a core. However, some people theorize, and falsely so, that the center of the planet might actually be hollow, or there's a species of reptilian aliens that live under the crust.
And falsely so. Okay, when you finish watching this video, first of all, you're going to find that we have never gone deeper than, I think it was something like 9 or 10 miles. That's the deepest anybody's ever gone. So we have no clue what's down there. And, as far as reptilians or whatever, okay, fine. But the hollow earth thing, every ancient culture had an understanding of the hollow earth. And it's certainly, if you subscribe to the Bible, there's at least 3 compartments down there. You got Abraham's bosom, you got Hades, and you got Tartarus, the prison of the Watchers. Okay, hollow earth. And Skywatch TV and a whole bunch of others are all about inner earth right now and hollow earth right now. There's abundant evidence for hollow earth. As far as all the stuff you see in the textbook about what's supposedly at the core of the earth, nothing but computer generated artwork. Now, that's it. We haven't gone deeper than 9 or 10 miles. But okay, let's continue.
Well, those theories are silly. They speak to our fascination with what we can't see. Several decades ago, 2 countries, America and Russia, raced to drill the deepest hole into the Earth with the goal of discovering what was at its core. Both projects were massive undertakings, and the world was fixated on what mysteries they'd find beneath the surface. Russia's efforts resulted in something called the Kola Super Deep Borehole, and when you see it, you might have to pick your jaw off the floor. Have you ever wondered what lies beneath the Earth's surface? In school, you're told there's a mantle and a core, but what if there was something else down there? Well, in the 1960s and 1970s, America and Russia each set off to find out. Both countries drilled boreholes deep into the ground until they couldn't go any further. They used enormous metal contraptions that were designed to break through even the toughest material. The world...
Okay, 60s and 70s. That's when all this started. Okay, Operation Deep Freeze, late 50s. Everybody pulls out. 1958, NASA and DARPA's formed. Go into the 60s, we're sending probes to Venus, Mercury, and Mars before we even gone to the moon. And the United States and Russia are drilling deep inside the Earth for some reason.
The world watched in awe as the Americans kicked off the race. The enormous drills were fired up, and everyone hoped the project would go according to plan. What kind of mysteries would the drillers find, if any? The United States called the endeavor Project Mohole, and they began their drilling off the Pacific coast of Mexico in 1961. This would be a massive effort with global interests, and there was a lot riding on the team's work.
1961. Are you guys starting to see the timeline here? 1961.
In order to ensure Project Mohole's success, the team submerged 6 massive buoys 200 feet under the water in a circular pattern. The Navy barge tasked with the actual drilling used sonar to maneuver itself over the center of the circle and align the enormous rig. The team was given very thorough instructions on how to handle the heavy rig. It was a dangerous operation, and extreme caution needed to be taken the entire time. Unfortunately, soon after the project began, it was abandoned due to lack of funding.
Lack of funding because they decided to put all their funding into going to Antarctica looking for moon rocks and faking the whole world with the moon landings.
Almost a decade later, the Russians had organized their own drilling team and began their quest to reach the center of the Earth. On May 24th, 1970, they set their sights on the Kola Peninsula. The Russians called their endeavor the Kola Super Deep Borehole. From 1970 to 1994, the skilled group of Russian drillers managed to burrow a third of the way through the Baltic continental crust. The hole they drilled still stands as the deepest man-made hole in the world. Here's an illustration showing just how deep the Russian borehole was. And this wasn't even the deepest it eventually went. At that point, it was deeper than Mount Everest was tall. That's an amazing geological feat. The Kola Super Deep Borehole was an incredible undertaking that was appreciated by most all of the people of Russia. In 1987, the country printed a number of stamps commemorating the drilling team's effort. This is a picture from a massive rig, the one the Russian team used to bore deep into the Earth's crust. It was so heavy and so dangerous that all it took was one wrong move from a driller for the team to have been crushed under the weight of the steel. Controlling the massive rig required several men at a time, and even then it was still often a struggle. The rig would sometimes jerk to one side, and the team had to be ready to reposition its massive arm at a moment's notice. This was the superstructure where the Kola deep borehole was located during the active digging period. The massive tower that loomed over the water was actually home to the enormous drilling rig. The end goal of the drilling project was to reach a depth of 49,000 feet into the Earth's crust. There were several holes dug that branched off the main hole, and the deepest branch, called SG3, reached a depth of an impressive 40,230 feet in 1989. In 1992, although the Russian team was still about 9,000 feet away from their goal, the drilling came to an abrupt end due to dangerous conditions. The temperature at such a depth was much higher than the team planned for, almost 600 degrees Fahrenheit, and it made drilling impossible. Although the drilling came to a complete stop, the entire project wasn't officially shut down until 2005. Unfortunately, in 2008, all of the facilities and the superstructure were scrapped and dismantled. Even though the buildings were abandoned, visitors can still walk around the ruins and imagine what life was like during the epic race to the center of the planet. It's a fascinating place to visit, but it's also unfortunate this grand structure was simply left to rot. If you do happen to visit the ruins of the building on the Kola Peninsula, you might not even notice the actual borehole itself. All that remains is a small 9-inch steel cap that covers the surface opening of the hole, which has since been dubbed the Hole to Hell. Even though the Russian team never reached their goal of 49,000 feet, the drilling did give the scientific world some major discoveries. Scientists now know a bit more about the planet's structure, and microscopic plankton fossils were even discovered at the bottom of the hole. The race to the center of the Earth was an exciting and intriguing time for the world. In the end, the goal was never reached, but at least the scientific community benefited from the efforts. Though defunct, this phenomenal structure still stands as a reminder of one project that had the world on the edge of its seat. What a feat!
Okay, so they didn't get to 49,000. They only got to something like, I think he said 40,200 or something like that, which is less than 8 miles. That's less than 8 miles. Even if they got to 49,000, that's, what is that? 49, let's look that up. 49,000, that's 9.2. We didn't even get that far. I think he said we only got to 40,200 or something like that.
Even the deepest drilled hole is still some 3,955 miles short of the center of the Earth. Barely a pinprick on the surface of our planet.
So 7 to 9 miles, really. And then we claimed we have all these pictures in the textbook about the center of the Earth and what the core of the Earth and everything else looks like. And they're going to say, all right, it's all fiction about the inner Earth and hollow Earth, all that stuff, when they have never even gone deeper than 8 miles. It's unbelievable. We have been lied to with artwork, pictures, paintings, drawings, CGI. Everything about our Earth and everything about space. Artwork. Speaking of space, there's something else that caught my attention, and I wrote about it in the Testing the Globe group. I said, the year is 2018, and someone has finally, only now, mind you, possibly figured out a solution for the radiation problem in space, though it still needs to be tested. Okay, ballers and NASA fanboys and girls, please explain this. If the Apollo crews allegedly had no problem with the Van Allen radiation belts, as you claim, why is this such an issue to overcome 50 years later? Although this is a funny quote from the article. It says, the STEMRAD vest for space use was developed based on the principle of selective protection vital organs that are particularly sensitive to radiation exposure, the ESA said in a statement. And that's the Israeli Space Agency. Apparently, the brain is not a vital organ worthy of protecting. Not sure how this will protect sensitive electronics and equipment, though, either. That's why the Orion project hasn't really done anything, because they haven't figured out how to protect all the onboard computers from all that radiation out there that Apollo apparently had no problem with.
Once we travel beyond low Earth orbit, the crew will be exposed to larger amounts of radiation. So we have to design both the crew protection systems and our electronic systems to withstand this radiation.
If there is something that definitely, at least in my opinion, exposes the Apollo program as a fraud, it's the Orion project. The Orion project, after they retired the space shuttle, the next project that's on the board right now is called Project Orion. And they're pretty much telling you that Apollo never happened, especially when they put out videos like this talking about the Van Allen radiation belts.
We are headed 3,600 miles above Earth, 15 times higher from the planet than the International Space Station. As we get further away from Earth, we'll pass through the Van Allen belts, an area of dangerous radiation.
What?
As we get further away from Earth, we'll pass through the Van Allen belts, an area of dangerous radiation.
One more time.
An area of dangerous radiation.
Oh. What's wrong with that radiation?
Radiation like this could harm the guidance systems, onboard computers, or other electronics on Orion. Naturally, we have to pass through this danger zone twice, once up and once back.
That doesn't sound good.
Naturally, we have to pass through this danger zone twice, once up and once back. But Orion has protection. Shielding will be put to the test as the vehicle cuts through the waves of radiation. Sensors aboard will record radiation levels for scientists to study. We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space.
What? We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space? I thought this problem was solved over 40 years ago when he sent a bunch of people in jumpsuits and tin cans through it there and back a half dozen times. But I forgot. The Apollo guys, they were clueless regarding the radiation belt. It didn't affect them.
I don't know the distance to the Van Allen radiation belt, and if we did, it wasn't a problem. If we were going to encounter it, then we would have had to build the spacecraft and the spacesuit to not give humans a problem. You don't just build something and hope it works. You study to see what the threats are, the environment is, and then you say, how thick do I have to make the metal on the spacecraft so that going through this kind of radiation or these kind of meteoroids, it won't get hurt. And so then we build it that way.
I help manage the Orion Crew and Service Module office. We're responsible for developing the crew capsule, which is where the crew lives and works when they're in space, and the service module, which is what provides the power and the fuel and the consumables then that is plumbed over to the crew module. We don't have the ultimate answer for radiation on Orion. We're still working on that. If we were to build Orion out of the materials we need and the sole job was to protect for the radiation environment, the vehicle would really be too heavy. So we have to balance the weight of the materials that we put on the spacecraft with how much protection it's providing the crew. So we're really looking at it from an operational perspective. If we understand a radiation event has happened, the crew will actually take shelter in the aft bay of the vehicle. We have found over the years that water is a really great radiation absorbing material. So we could do things like water that's already there in the water bags for drinking and things like that. That water could be used to shield them. As well as we've had some concepts like a water-filled vest that they could put on should they know there's an event and need to be protected.
We don't have a clue when it comes to like how to protect them from like radiation. So we're gonna just like put them up there in like water suits. Yeah, we like water suits, and like we put water all around them, so the radiation could go like into the water, and then they could drink it, and it could be like a Fantastic Four. Everybody they'll come back and be mutants when they get back. But we just got some ideas, yeah. But don't worry about it. Yeah, I know there are refugees everywhere, and like people are starving and stuff, and like we have homeless all over the place. But if we spend like a few $1 trillion, I think we should be able to figure out how to make water suits for the astronauts in space, and then maybe it'll work out like it did for the guys in Apollo.
The belts are 1,000 miles to 25,000 miles above the Earth.
We went right out through them.
No effects on your cells?
We didn't even know it. I don't think anybody, well, maybe somebody said you went through the radiation belt, but we didn't feel it inside, and we didn't get any, added radiation.
Yeah, if you pretend that it's not really there, then you can just go right through it.
To protect the astronauts from the Van Allen radiation belts, the lunar module would have required 6 feet of lead shielding. But here's what they really had for protection.
Obviously, the only shielding they had was the literally paper-thin outer hull of aluminum, and their suits consisting of glass fiber, some aluminum fibers, and silicon rubber.
It's very interesting concerning radiation that the astronauts were protected by a thin film of aluminum, when here on Earth they put a lead shield on us when they take a dental x-ray.
In conclusion, when NASA themselves admit to never having left low Earth orbit, and the fact that we don't even have the materials that could withstand the extreme temperatures and cosmic rays in space, how on earth can anyone believe that we ever went to the moon?
But yeah, go on believing in the Apollo program and the associated pictures of Earth that allegedly came from it. By the way, anyone care to take any bets as to whether or not these Uber vests will be used to clean up Fukushima and other severely polluted radiation sites on Earth first? Seems to me our priorities are severely screwed up if we don't. It also further proves an agenda, and you can check that article out here. I'll post the link in the show notes there, talking about this super vest that the Israelis apparently created in connection with NASA. But yeah, and while all of that was going on, I see some knucklehead out there has put together a $100,000 flat Earth challenge for Rob Skiba. Okay. This is just, first of all, I don't believe that these people have that kind of money. Second of all, it would cost more than that to go down there and do everything that needs to be done. Third of all, I have no interest in going to one of the most hostile places on the Earth. I've worked in very cold weather conditions before. I happen to like my fingers and toes and other parts of my body. I don't want to freeze them off. And it's extremely dangerous, and I have no interest in going down there. I've already been convinced. I don't need to go do something as stupid as that for some idiot that's trying to offer me $20,000 a year for 5 years that he doesn't even have. But yeah, this idiot was upset that I wasn't acknowledging him, so he put out another video. Rob Skiba deletes challenge within an hour of posting.
So yesterday I posted a video called the $100,000 Flat Earth Challenge for Rob Skiba, and got some really interesting messages and comments, and probably going to do a video and delve into some of that later on. But I really wanted to come on real quick and let everyone know that I posted a link to this video on Rob Skiba's YouTube channel on his most recent video. And I actually had to use a sock account because I think it was probably 2 years ago. He blocked me from his YouTube channel because I challenged a doctrinal issue that he was talking about, and he couldn't really argue. He basically had to leave the doctrinal conversation and start calling me nuts and crazy, and he just went off the rail because he could not argue past that point any further. So he chose to call me nuts and crazy and block me. So I had to use a sock account. And so I posted the link to this video, which I'm sure somebody probably sent it to him already. But I wanted to make sure he saw it. And within 1 hour, he had already deleted it from his YouTube channel.
Okay. First of all, if I block you, it's because you're an idiot and I don't have time to deal with you anymore. I have no problem with people who disagree with me and can have and have no problem engaging in lengthy debates. I've had marathon debates before on YouTube and certainly on Facebook and elsewhere with people who disagree with me. But when you have proven that you are bat crap crazy stupid idiot, there's no point in continuing the discussion anymore. And this person clearly is a bat crap crazy stupid idiot. And you know what? I'm just calling it the way it is. But let me address something first real quick. First of all, don't flatter yourself. I'm not afraid of you, and I didn't delete anything. I didn't even see anything. And when I was looking at this video here to see what the heck is this guy talking about, he's got his post there, and I saw that it was on the video that I posted about QAnon, and this is his comment that he says that I deleted. So I went to my channel, and I'm like, what is he talking about? I went here, this video right here.
Hey, what's up? It's Billy Jean.
And by the way, I don't read, after like the day that I post the video, it's rare that I read comments much beyond a day or two after I post them. I just don't have time. The other thing that I don't do is look at this right here. You have comments waiting your review. This is, there's already a bunch of comments that I got to deal with that I don't have time for. So I never even look at this, but I decided to look at this to see what the heck is this guy talking about. And I actually posted on his wall here that he was an idiot and that I didn't delete anything from him. And I don't even see my post here either. It could be here. I just don't see it. But I have a feeling the same thing happened to my comment that happened to his comment. So just a little word of advice to all you people up in arms freaking out thinking, Rob Skiba is deleting my comments.
He's blocking me. He's not listening to me. I posted a video that debunks his video.
Whenever you post a comment that has a link in it, many times, I don't know if it happens all the time, but many times YouTube puts it in the review category. And that's what you see right here. So I decided to see if that was the case. And sure enough, here's Captain Baltard's comment right here. So I finally did look at it. Yeah, I got to show you something else. Just for those people who, are upset with me calling this guy an idiot. Let's see. As Forrest Gump said, stupid is as stupid does. This is just one of many reasons why I would block somebody like this. Listen to this genius.
Got to go out there and look back. And you'd have to be 200 to 300 miles out to be able to look back and take a decent picture and get the whole thing or close to the whole thing in one shot. That's really difficult. That's hard to do. But to prove that the Earth is flat, all you have to do is go to Japan on the flat Earth model. Go to that Japan. Of course, the problem is I don't know how you're going to get to that Japan because Japan isn't there. That's not where Japan is. To get to Japan, you'd have to go to LA, jump on a flight, and fly west, not east, but west. So that's, you got a problem right there. How do you get to the Japan on the flat Earth model? So, but let's lay that aside. Let's say you could get to the Japan on the flat Earth model. Let's say you could do that. All you have to do is find a high place or a low place because the Earth is flat. Remember, it's flat. The whole thing's flat. So all you have to do is just go to the flat Earth Japan and just look out over the flat. Because water finds its level, right? Water doesn't curve, right? So it's flat, right? Okay, so all you have to do is go to the flat Earth model Japan and just look out over the ocean, and you should see it. You should see a rim of ice circling around that part of the Earth if it's flat. And it would also be easy to charter a boat or a ship and just go out there. Easy, so much easier to prove the Earth is flat than it is to prove the Earth is a globe. If your criteria is, well, we want one shot.
Need I say more? Wow. Alrighty then. Enough of this idiot. But to answer the challenge why I wouldn't go down there, I'm going to conclude this video with a mirror of Taboo Conspiracies video, Antarctica, Sorry We're Closed, Our Hidden Flat Earth. Fantastic video. I suggest that you subscribe just as I did to his channel. He's got some great stuff out there. But for all you guys that are, oh, yeah, okay, just show us a picture.
Just go to Antarctica, take a picture, go touch the dome, and show the rest of us, all right?
This is why that can't be done. Please try to pay attention. Thank you.
Welcome, everyone. This video is in response to the many globe propagandists who demand that I show a picture of the edge of the flat Earth. For the dozens of these ball-loving zealots with multiple sock puppet accounts who repeat this mantra daily, your demand is ridiculous. But you probably already knew that, right? And that's why you probably keep demanding it. It's actually pretty funny that I just got one of these take a picture comments an hour ago. I'm going to prove in this video that independent travel is not allowed under the Antarctic Treaty System. That fact alone should cause any thinking person to begin questioning our official models. Because something big is being hidden from we, the plebeians, and we're not talking about penguins. For most flat earthers, based on the information that we can reasonably gather, Antarctica constitutes the outer rim of the known world. In other words, Antarctica is likely the shoreline to all of the world's oceans. Like a ring magnet, north constitutes the center of our flat Earth map, and south is every direction away from the northern center. And before I get a dozen comments claiming that such a magnet is impossible, here's a ring magnet shown here. Notice that south is in every direction away from the center north magnetic pole. This is where the 60th south parallel is on a Mercator map. This is the 60th south parallel on a potential flat Earth azimuthal equidistant map. It seems that Antarctica constitutes the circular shore of the known world. So, demanding that I take a picture of a possible edge of the Earth, if any, requires me to not only travel below the 60th south parallel, represented by the circle, but also to cross the entire breadth of Antarctica. According to official numbers, Antarctica has a diameter of roughly 3,400 miles. And so that means our trek will include a long boat ride for hundreds of miles below the 60th south parallel, plus a minimum 6,800 mile round-trip hike across Antarctica. That's assuming the official model is correct. Maybe we could fly to one of the ceremonial pole areas, but that would still leave at least a 3,400 mile hike. In addition, we wouldn't know for sure whether the plane trip itself was interfering with our results, since the pilot would have to follow a designated path outlined by the Antarctic Treaty System, and who truly knows what direction that is until we get there. In order to be fully confident, we would really need to stick to the ground and have control over our own pathway, where we can control our direct southerly route opposite of the northern magnetic pole. Now, whether Antarctica is a smaller continent next to the outer rim, or whether Antarctica is indeed the shoreline of the known world, I don't know the answer. Flat earthers don't have a government budget to spend $1 billion to hire hundreds of cartographers and fleets of boats and planes to map the entire world. But even if flat earthers had the money, we would still run into the Antarctic problem, which is the point of this video. So, what is the Antarctic problem? It is the fact that independent travel is not allowed below the 60th south parallel in any reasonable manner to make any determination as to whether Antarctica is the shoreline boundary circumscribing the known world, or whether Antarctica is simply a continent a little north of the true but unnamed southerly shoreline of the Earth's oceans. For all we know, Antarctica may be an infinite plain that is uninhabitable at further distances. Again, we don't know. But, as I will describe in this video, I suspect that Antarctica is the shoreline circumscribing the known world due to the unbelievable restrictions placed on travel there. Excluding a couple of questionable claims, the total lack of north-south circumnavigation only proves the same. But if I'm not allowed by our governments to independently travel below the 60th south parallel and then to traverse Antarctica over 6,800 miles, then I cannot take a picture of a theoretical edge, dome, or those other lands beyond the South Pole, whatever the case may be. But you probably don't quite grasp how much area is really being blocked off under the Antarctic Treaty System. Let's look at it from the alleged 60th north parallel, because this will give you an idea of the tremendous area blocked off to independent exploration. This is the area of the 60th north parallels. As you can see, the 60th north parallel includes all of northern Canada, Alaska, much of Russia, including St. Petersburg and other major cities, Finland, Sweden, Norway, Iceland, Greenland. It is huge. Now, why in the world is this much area blocked off at the south? Do you really think it's because of penguins?
You see, first there was just one, now there's thousands of them.
Are they trying to tell us something?
So what's the problem?
Well, among other things, we are messing with their food chain.
And we have got to do something about it.
We suggest a ban on all marine harvesting.
Do you think the child propaganda from Happy Feet is true? The Antarctic Treaty was executed in 1959 and has been in place ever since. Think about it. No country had any real alleged concerns about the environment at that time. One of the more interesting facts is that the Soviet Union also ratified the treaty, and did so from the beginning on December 1st, 1959. Do you really think the Soviets were truly concerned about the penguins and the fragile Antarctic environment? In other words, America, the USSR, and the rest of the major countries of the world remained partners in generally closing Antarctica throughout most of the so-called fake space race, the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962, the fake moon landings, most of the Cold War, the Vietnam War, the Six-Day War, the Soviet-Afghan War, and the collapse of the Soviet Union, which at that time Russia continued as a signatory in 1992. That's some peculiar cooperation transcending international conflicts, don't you think? Do you really think that the vast resources and strategic military benefits of Antarctica were multilaterally put aside because of penguins? Even North Korea has been a signatory since 1987. For some strange reason, the Antarctic Treaty has remained sacrosanct for nearly 60 years, regardless of worldwide conflicts. For the reasonable, objective person, alarm bells should be going off right now. As I was preparing this video, I found something else that's interesting. Out of all the flags of all the countries across the Earth, can you guess which one only shows a map of the country as the emblem of the country? You guessed it. Only one. Antarctica. Yeah, the one country they want you to know the shape of. That doesn't reek of programming, does it? Let me make this clear from the beginning. Travel to Antarctica is more difficult than travel to a military base. Sure, the military base may have a visitor shop near the entrance, but if you go beyond that visitor shop or another designated travel area without clearance, you're going to get arrested, or something worse. I'm sure I already have a few globe shields ready to pounce, armed with various inanities to counter my statement, but let's ignore the global spin. This video is about evidence and facts and the reasonable assumptions based thereon. So let's decide to take a theoretical trip across Antarctica to find the edge, if any. I'm not talking about going to the visitor center along the edge of Antarctica, or an overly expensive cruise to a small ice shelf along the edge with a small excursion, or a flight to one of the multiple ceremonial poles, and then straight back again. Yeah, that's not strange at all. I must reiterate, because I will get a dozen comments telling me to take a cruise or that someone's best friend went to Antarctica. I am not talking about a trip to one of the few designated tourist locations of Antarctica. I'm talking about a real trek, pointed directly south across the entire 3,400-mile breadth of Antarctica and back again to determine whether Antarctica circumscribes the known world and to possibly determine whether there's an edge, a dome, or whatever, and then take a picture of it. I'm talking about repeating the trek of Admiral Byrd and discovering that area as big as the United States that has never been seen by a human being on the other side of the South Pole, full of minerals and such just waiting to be explored.
But strangely enough, there is left in the world today an area as big as the United States that's never been seen by a human being. And that's beyond the pole on the other side of the South Pole from Middle America. And I think it's quite astonishing that there should be an area as big as that unexplored.
Okay, let's get started with our theoretical trip. So what is required to trek across the entire breadth of Antarctica? Now, I'm in the United States, and so we're going to examine it from the position of a slave of the U.S. But the rules are going to be the same for all 53 signatory countries of the Antarctic Treaty, and everyone else, since these countries all enforce the same provisions. To begin with, we need to understand that anything below the 60th south parallel is referred to as the Antarctic Treaty Area. What does that mean? That means I'm generally not allowed within hundreds of miles of Antarctica, from approximately 400 to 900 miles, without obtaining a permit to do so. Now, the U.S. government has recorded that some sailors have seen the mountain ranges of Antarctica at 300 miles distance while sailing. Of course, 300 miles should be impossible on the globe with a curvature drop of 11.4 miles, but the 60th parallel is between 400 and 900 miles away from the shoreline of Antarctica. Even under a flat Earth, that's a lot of lower atmosphere to see through, also referred to as atmospheric extinction factor, and a lot of angular size reduction. Despite the claims of the ignorant globe zealots, you can't see through that much lower atmosphere. In other words, I can't even see Antarctica from the ocean without first obtaining a permit from the U.S. State Department, or whatever department that controls that in your country. Taking a trip to the 60th South Parallel isn't going to accomplish anything, and so we're stuck with getting a government permit. So let's go through the steps to obtaining a permit from the U.S. State Department. This is the handbook of the Antarctic Treaty System. These are the rules that govern all signatories to the treaty. We'll be citing to it regularly as it lays down the rules that govern the Antarctic Treaty beyond the fluff of the treaty language itself. Most importantly, we're going to look at the rules governing non-governmental activities located here, and some of the rules regarding the protection of the environment located here. Now, as a U.S. slave, this is the first form you'll have to submit to get approved to travel to Antarctica. The form itself seems rather innocuous until you understand exactly what is involved in the application process. In summary, Antarctica is treated as a giant natural reserve. Like a military base, all activities and pathways in Antarctica must be approved. This is unlike any other area in the world, except maybe a place like North Korea. So, when I say that no independent travel is allowed below the 60th south parallel, I'm stating an admitted fact well recorded as international law. The protocol states, as a matter of principle, that all activities are to be planned and conducted on the basis of information sufficient to evaluate their possible impact on the Antarctic environment and its associated ecosystems, and on the value of Antarctica for the conduct of scientific research. Organizers should be aware that the environmental protocol requires that activities shall be modified, suspended, or canceled if they result or threaten to result in impacts upon the Antarctic environment or dependent or associated ecosystems. If you visit Russia, with a Russian visa, for example, are you limited to one particular neighborhood and certain pathways? For those who visit America as a tourist, are you restricted to New York City? Or are you generally allowed to travel around America? No one is just allowed to travel around Antarctica. All of your activities, vehicles, and pathways must be approved, but it gets much worse. Now, how many genuine people watching this video think that the purpose of seeing the edge, the dome, or the extended plain beyond Antarctica would be approved by the U.S. State Department and the other myriad of agencies? Are you ready to litigate the matter when some State Department official arbitrarily says something like, "I think your expedition is frivolous and would be too damaging to the environment, especially in the light of the frivolity of the expedition"? I don't think a court will overturn that decision, especially when treaty law supersedes any rights you may think you have. So, we're going to have to come up with some fake expedition that will somehow get approved. Let's say we're a tree-hugging Luciferian geologist conducting a comprehensive analysis of the global carbon footprint on Antarctica and its flora and fauna. I think that sounds plausible, and so we could hypothetically fake our way in with respect to our purpose, but it will be tricky. Okay, I'm not advocating that anyone break the law. This is all theoretical. That brings us to the next point. Entire swaths of land are entirely off limits to all travel. These are called specially protected areas. It's pretty much guaranteed that no one is going to get a permit to go through a specially protected area. If my math is right, that's 1,373 square miles that are allegedly specially protected areas. You can see the maps on the websites, but I don't have time to plot all of them. Now, I agree that's not huge in comparison to the total alleged area of Antarctica. But I believe there's a distinct possibility that those swaths of land could be coordinated in such a way as to prevent me from going through Antarctica easily. So, right from the beginning, my route may be extra hard, especially if mountain pathways are blocked and the areas are much larger than claimed due to likely globe distance shenanigans. But let's go ahead and assume we can navigate around those prohibited, specially protected areas. Next, no motorized equipment is allowed at all for non-governmental personnel. Page 308 states, "Do not use aircraft, vessels, small boats, or other means of transport in ways that disturb wildlife either at sea or on land." That seems kind of hard and very subjective, doesn't it? Antarctica itself is supposed to have a diameter of 3,400 miles. That means no motorized equipment for at least a 6,800 mile round trip? That sounds pretty damn impossible, right? Especially if Antarctica is much bigger than what is claimed. What about sled dogs? Surely they'll be allowed. What's that? Sled dogs aren't even allowed? Okay, so our trip is now limited to a very long hike in insanely harsh conditions over an extreme rise of elevation. On a side note, Antarctica has the highest average elevation of any alleged continent, but I'm sure that's just coincidence, right? But getting back to our insane trip, we not only have to walk at least 6,800 miles, mostly depending on when we need to turn around, we must also tread extremely lightly as walking on plants in Antarctica is prohibited. I can't damage plants or frighten wildlife on a 6,800 mile journey in a wilderness? I wonder if the Lewis and Clark expedition was limited by such requirements. Good luck traversing 6,800 miles on foot without damaging plants or frightening wildlife with no motorized equipment. I'm not saying that we couldn't figure out a way to get around these big issues, or maybe we could just, theoretically ignore the issues once we get there. But again, I'm not advocating that anyone break the law. I'm saying that these are listed enforcement rules under the Antarctic Treaty System. And so think of how easy it would be for one of the many international bureaucrats reviewing our application to deny a permit to trek across Antarctica based on this one plausible excuse. Sorry, you're going to end up walking on plants and scaring birds at least one time during your 6,800-mile journey, and the Antarctic Treaty System prohibits such activities. Application denied. For argument's sake, let's just assume we're going to figure out a way to get around that. Don't ask me how. The next issue is, how are we going to carry all that food and fuel for heat? And don't think that the Antarctic Treaty System isn't concerned with how we store our fuel. The United States itself is roughly 2,500 miles across. So imagine the difficulty of hauling food, climbing at extremely high and unknown elevations, and carrying all of your extremely warm gear and supplies across the United States from coast to coast and back again, all on foot with no food stops along the way. And don't forget, we're going to have to haul our poop as well. You are going to have to drag your poop with you on your 6,800-mile Antarctic hike. But it gets worse. Your poop is regulated by a different pseudo-government agency, the National Science Foundation. Here's where you can learn about what permit is required if you wanted to dispose of your poop on your 6,800-mile journey if you don't want to carry it. Could you imagine for your next trip to France and the custom agent saying, "Welcome to France. By the way, no vehicles are allowed, no animals are allowed, do not walk on any plants, and here's a bag for your poop. Be sure to bring it back full." If you don't want to carry your poop, you're going to have to get a permit from the National Science Foundation. Enjoy your stay. But here's another and potentially bigger problem. What if there is no edge when you get there, but the conditions only get worse? How many years of supplies can one carry by a handheld sled and some skis? What if Antarctica goes beyond 3,400 miles? What then? When do you turn your back, and how do you prove it? Because the globe shows are just going to call you a liar anyways. Any sane person right now would have to admit that our little trip is impossible, but we have a lot of paid-for apologists for our slave masters who will still somehow claim that I'm lying when I say that independent travel in Antarctica is prohibited. But we're not done. Going back to our form DS4131, in addition to disclosure to other parties to the treaty, the information provided may be shared with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency to ensure compliance with 40 CFR Part 8 Environmental Impact Assessment of Non-Governmental Activities in Antarctica, as well as with other relevant U.S. agencies. This brings us to one of the most important issues facing us. What is an environmental impact assessment? No country, even North Korea, would ever require an environmental assessment before traveling across their country. It's insane. Here's the definition of an environmental impacts assessment in the U.S. Code of Federal Regulations. Environmental impact assessment means the environmental review process required by the provisions of this part and by Annex 1 of the Protocol, and includes preparation by the operator and U.S. government review of an environmental document and public access to and circulation of environmental documents to other parties and the Committee on Environmental Protection as required by Annex 1 of the Protocol. Well, let's see what the Committee for Environmental Protection says. Article 8 of the Protocol requires the parties to conduct environmental impact assessments for the Antarctic activities and provides 3 levels of assessment according to the potential impacts of each activity. The procedures for environmental impact assessment are detailed in Annex 1 of the Protocol. If a proposed activity is determined in a preliminary stage of assessment to have less than a minor or transitory impact, it may proceed. If an activity is determined as likely to have a minor or transitory impact, then an initial environmental evaluation must be prepared. If an initial environmental evaluation indicates the potential for more than a minor or transitory impact, or if such impact is otherwise determined to be likely, a comprehensive environmental evaluation must be prepared. Draft CEEs are made publicly available and considered by the CEP, which then advises the ATCM, and that's a Antarctic Treaty Consultative Meeting, Comments provided by other parties in the ATCM must be addressed in a final CEE, which is used as a basis for making decision about whether and how the activity is conducted. Same law as here. It is the comprehensive environmental evaluation that's going to kill our expedition. Here's the regulation, and this applies to all signatories, including North Korea. Any operator who plans a non-governmental expedition that would require a CEE must submit a draft of the CEE by December 1st of the preceding year. Within 15 days of receipt of the draft CEE, EPA will send it to the Department of State, which will circulate it to all parties to the protocol and forward it to the Committee for Environmental Protection established by the protocol and publish notice of receipt of the CEE and request for comments on the CEE in the Federal Register and will provide copies to any person upon request. The EPA will accept public comments on the CEE for a period of 90 days following notice in the Federal Register. The EPA, in consultation with other interested federal agencies, will evaluate the CEE to determine if the CEE meets the requirements under Article 8, Annex 1 to the protocol and the provisions of this part and will transmit its comments to the operator within 120 days following publication in the Federal Register of the notice of availability of the CEE. So, now, I'm sure most of you probably just went brain dead when I read that, so let me explain it. First, our CEE, that's our Comprehensive Environmental Evaluation, must pass the EPA's initial review. Not an easy task. Next, the Department of State, along with its Office of Ocean and Polar Affairs Bureau of Oceans, Environment and Science, must review it. Next, it will be sent to all parties. That's 100 countries, by the way. Next, your assessment must be approved by an international bureaucracy called the Committee for Environmental Protection. After their highly unlikely approval, the EPA will then publish it in the United States Federal Register. Now, why would they do that? Because any supposed private tree-hugging group can now sue to stop you from going there. Once that is done, assuming you haven't been sued, then the EPA, along with all of the other interested federal agency, whatever the hell that means, evaluates it again. Do you realize the amount of legal work this would entail? Do you realize how easy it would be for any one of hundreds of entities or thousands of bureaucrats to halt your expedition? Again, this applies to all countries. One person in the comments of my last Antarctic video claimed that it wasn't necessary in the United Kingdom. Well, he lied. The Environmental or Madrid Protocol is part of the Antarctic Treaty System and applies to all countries. Here is the requirement on the UK application if you're interested. As explained above, for every person in the United States who wants to get a permit to travel across Antarctica, has to first submit the environmental impact assessment to the EPA. You know, the freedom-loving EPA.
Beware! Beware! Time is short! EPA! 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 Believe me! Believe me! Thanks for listening.
Lost them, sir.
Well, then you find them, and you get them back in the dome. And to make sure nobody else gets out, I want roving death squads around the perimeter 24/7.
Do you know what the environmental impact statement costs? This is very similar. A typical environmental impact statement costs from $250,000 to $2 million. And those are a lot easier than this comprehensive environmental analysis required under the Antarctic Treaty. For us, the biggest problem is that you would have to incur the expense of the environmental impact assessment before you know if you're denied, due to whatever arbitrary claim a bureaucrat can think of. Do you see how difficult this environmental assessment will be? How would one know the environmental impact on an area which you've never been to, and very little information would be available? With a normal environmental assessment, you'd be able to send an engineering firm to the location to make the assessment with attorneys who would draft the statement. In this case, you can't send an engineering firm all the way to Antarctica, and so you have to hire Antarctic experts who have been to the same places you're planning on walking through. Now, how many of those do you think there are? I say that we can safely assume that the price of getting an environmental impact assessment approved by the EPA and the international agency would cost millions, assuming no supposed private group sues you once you've once it's published in the Federal Register. Do you have more than $2 million to spend for an environmental impact assessment? And then, what if the EPA or the Committee for Environmental Protection or one of the other agencies says no? Maybe that not enough information was provided. Are you ready to spend another $2 million to fight that in court? But you still have to have your purpose approved. Do you see the problem there? You would likely spend millions on getting the environmental impact statement, only later to have some official at the International Committee for Environmental Protection reject your purpose in Antarctica. You would truly gamble millions in this silly endeavor. To learn more about the environmental assessment procedures with the Committee for Environmental Protection, you can research it here. See also. Let's get to the final issue we're going to run into. 7 countries claim territorial rights to various parts of Antarctica. Argentina, Australia, Chile, France, New Zealand, Norway, and the United Kingdom all maintain territorial claims in Antarctica. And I did find it interesting that the USSR never claimed territorial rights to Antarctica. Yeah. I'm willing to bet that my trip across Antarctica is going to need other permits from other countries based only on territorial claims. Getting more permits or visas from other countries who have alleged territory in Antarctica? Yeah, that shouldn't add too much to our already strained budget. Now, just for the propagandist who's going to claim that's not true, I quote, "The Antarctic Treaty puts aside the potential for conflict over sovereignty for providing that nothing that occurs while the treaty is in force will enhance or diminish territorial claims." Meaning, the territorial claims trump. So, the next dumb shill who demands that you take a picture of the edge or that anyone can go to Antarctica and see for themselves that it's a continent, be sure to point out what a damn idiot they are, and then share this video because everything in here is fact that anyone can look up, and I'll try to have all the links in the description. Of course, the lying minions from the Ministry of Truth will spin and call you names, but at least the rest of the world will see the liars for who they truly are. This is Taboo Conspiracy, signing off.